is we provide training programs, usually for corporations and also government agencies. But in terms of my personal experience in interviews, I'm originally from Canada. So I've worked in Canada, Hong Kong, Japan, and now Indonesia. So 4 countries and very different organizations. So I've gone through a lot of interviews as well. And I can tell you, even though it's different countries, usually HR has a very strategic way of asking questions. So even for my job at the British Council, so I started working at the British Council last year, and I had to do interviews with the British Council as well. And through that experience, I will share with you the types of interviews that you may be asked and some tips and suggestions on how to prepare for them. So let's just go through my slides. So by the end of this session, it's a half-hour session. You will know that there are 2 different types of interview questions. Identify some common questions that you will be asked. As I mentioned, I've worked in 4 different countries, and I can tell you there's at least half a dozen questions that regardless of the country and regardless of the company will be asked. Know the skills the questions are looking for. So there are specific things that employers or HR are looking for when they ask you questions, and how to prepare the answers beforehand. So the key to a great interview is that you practice beforehand. You've tried to identify questions that they will ask, and you have some pre-prepared answers to it. Today's talk, we will cover 3 main things. First, the types of interview questions. The second are strategies for answering them. The third, how to prepare for interviews. So I'm going to give you very specific tips that you can learn at home and practice at home. And finally, some Q&A sessions. So let's start. So what are the 2 types of interview questions? Usually for interviews, you'll have traditional questions and behavioral questions. Traditional questions are, I'll give you some examples. So what's the difference between traditional and behavioral questions? So traditional questions, usually they're generic questions. I will give you examples in the next slide. They ask about your background, your skills, and your values, and they usually ask you to describe a situation. The second one is behavioral questions. Behavioral questions, and this is more and more HR are asking more behavioral questions, and there's a specific way in answering this. So for behavioral questions, I was actually asked this type of questions for the British Council, so I had to actually practice my answers for these ones as well. Next one that we have is it's identified skills. So usually HR has identified skills that they're specifically looking for. So they've structured questions around the skills. And they talk about how you handled a situation in the past, And the reason they're asking that is because usually behavior and performance, they ask about behavior and performance. Behavior and performance. So for traditional questions, usually the first question that they'll say is, tell me about yourself. When they ask you a question about tell me about yourself, this is not the time to tell your life story. I studied in this, I did this job. This is not what they're looking for. So if you're applying for a job in communication or sales and they say, tell me about yourself, think about what you learned in school if you're a new graduate or you are just started a new job, and think about things that you studied or what you did in your past job that is tied to those skills. So for example, when I was interviewing for the British Council and they said, tell me about yourself. And I mentioned when I was in Canada, I was working in communications, so I have a lot of experience in communications. Then I moved to Japan and I did a lot of training for Japanese companies. So when they say, tell me about yourself, tell things about yourself, about your experience, about your education that's tied to the job that you're applying for. Do not share that I volunteer at this, I enjoy cooking in my spare time. That's not what they're looking for. So for tell me about yourself, usually I recommend to people have a 30-second up to 1 minute answer that you prepared beforehand, Other traditional questions are, how do you handle stressful situations at work? So they want to see what are your skills when you are stressed, when you have time limits at your work, time pressures. The other one says, where do you see yourself in 5 years? I'm going to share a funny story. When I just graduated, after 2 years of working, I was applying for another job. And this was one of the questions that they asked me. And I was very naive. I said, in 5 years, I see myself in graduate school, which I eventually did. But when you're applying for a job, this is not a good answer to share, because they know if you say, oh, in 5 years, I want to do my grad studies, they know that you're going to leave. So why are they going to hire you if you already have plans to leave on or before 5 years? Usually for this type of question, you can say that with the same organization, with more responsibilities or handling more projects or mentoring new hires. So imagine yourself 5 years down the road with this organization. What other responsibilities and roles do you think you would like to be in 5 years? So this question is to ask, how do you see yourself growing with the company in 5 years? Let's go on. Why did you leave your last job, and what makes you a good fit for this organization? And obviously the one below, I've been asked this question, what are your strengths and weaknesses? So these are the traditional questions that you can prepare answers beforehand. And almost all of the jobs that I've had at least 3 questions in this list that was asked. Let's go to the next one. For this session, I'm going to focus more on behavioral questions, because this is for some, this is a new type of interview approach. And for a lot of people, they've not had a lot of experience on how to approach behavioral questions. So behavioral questions are those that employer has identified what skills are needed.
Hi, Sarah. Sorry
Hi.
for interrupting. Your slide is not moving.
Oh, okay. Which slide are we in?
Everything.
Oh, okay. Could you tell me what slide you're seeing right now?
Only the
page number. I'll share again. Okay, so I'll share
interface
again.
of your PowerPoint.
Okay, so let me share again. Apologies for that. Okay, can you see it now? It says behavioral questions.
Nope.
Okay.
Okay.
Let me stop share.
I'm going to share the screen for you. How about?
Sure. Do you have a copy of my slide? Maybe we can share that instead, if that's easier. Sorry about that. So we had a small technical issue. Okay, so next slide, please. Okay, great. So.
Which one?
Yes, please keep going. So I'll just go a little bit more. So traditional questions. We're happy to, I don't know if we can share the slides afterwards. I'm happy to share it afterwards if necessary. And then next slide, please. Okay, so I can control your screen.
Yeah, great. You can control with, just use your arrow key.
Okay. Sorry, which key?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, so as I mentioned, tell me about yourself is one of the questions that they ask. And this is usually this is something that you should prepare beforehand. Make sure it's tied to the job. How do you handle stressful situations at work? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? As I mentioned earlier, usually this is how do you see yourself in the company 5 years from now? Why did you leave your last job? When this question is asked, always try to put a positive way of saying. So for example, I'm looking for more challenge. I'm looking to work with a larger organization. Those are some of the types of answers I would recommend. What makes you a good fit for this job? And obviously, what are your strengths and weaknesses? So this type of questions, as I mentioned, I've been asked at least 3 questions from this list out of every single job interview I've had. So you can prepare your answers beforehand, and we'll talk about that later on. As I mentioned, we're going to try to discuss behavioral questions and how to answer them because there's a specific strategy on answering these questions. And more, HR and international organizations are asking these types of questions. So usually an employer has identified what skills are needed. It could be communication skills, leadership skills, time management skills. And the questions are designed to identify these skills. They talk about behavior and performance because what they feel is that your past behavior is a future indicator of how you will do well in this job. So, and as I mentioned, there's a very specific way of answering these questions. And I'll talk about that and we'll practice some in the next couple of minutes. So to answer this question, you use a CAR or STAR interview methods. I don't know if anybody has seen this before, but a CAR is usually context, the situation, action, and result. And STAR is situation, task, action, and results. The CAR-STAR interview methods. So for situation, you introduce a situation to the employer and set the context. Usually this is where the problem you discuss. The task describes the task you had to complete. So for example, what was the mistake? What was the goal? The action explains what you did and how you did it. And the result ends usually with you solving the problem, but also not just solving the problem, but also saying a result of how personally as an individual, how did you grow from this? The CAR method is usually the S and T combined together. So I will talk more about STAR because it gives you more details. So let's practice one. A question that will be asked, tell me about the time you made a mistake. What did you do to correct it? So for a lot of job interviews, I've been asked this question as well. And usually what they're looking for is your accountability. In terms of, did you own up to your mistake, your responsibility, how did you fix it, and also in terms of your action, did you fix the problem or did you avoid it? And they're looking at how did you learn from this situation? So let's give an example. For example, you've just started a new job. And so I'm going to discuss S, situation. And the way you'll answer is, in my last job, when I first started my last job, I was working with a new client, a new important client, and I gave him an estimate for a project for a budget. Unfortunately, after we've spoken on the phone, after I've emailed him the proposal, I realized that I made a mistake in the proposed budget. So there's a situation, there's the problem. Immediately after realizing that mistake, I talked to my boss. So here we're talking about accountability. I immediately approached my boss, explained the situation, and he gave me some advice on how to handle it. So that is your situation and your task. And my next action, after apologizing to my boss, I contacted the client. I apologized about the mistake, and we decided to give him a 10% additional product. So the price that we quoted, we changed it to the correct price, but with a 10% additional bonus. As a result, the client was really happy about it. He understood that mistakes happen. And my manager was really happy because he appreciated how honest and quick I was to identify my mistake. In the end, in order to avoid this mistake, so again, not just to fix the problem, but your own, to avoid this mistake, what I did was I printed our budgets and our estimates, and I made sure to double check the proposals that I sent to clients from then on. So that's the result. Again, this talks about your accountability. Did you own up to your mistake? How quickly did you recognize your mistake and discuss it with your line manager? How did you take responsibility about it? How did you fix it instead of avoid the problems? And how did you learn better? So these are the skills that they're looking for. And as you can see with the STAR method, it's a very, very quick answer. You have the situation and the problem. You had the mistake that you made, immediately how you handled it, the actions you did to rectify this mistake, the results, happy client, the boss was really proud that I owned up to my mistake. And in future, to avoid similar mistakes, I did X, Y, and Z. So this is how you would structure your answer to behavioral questions. Next slide. So tips for acing interviews. There's really only 2 tips for acing interviews. You prepare and you practice. Some people ask me, how do I prepare? I don't know what questions they will ask. There's actually some tips on how you can do that. So for example, make a list of questions. Make a list of questions. How do you do this? What you can do is think about past interviews you've had. So actually, personally, I have a binder of questions and answers that I have that I started about 12 years ago. 12 years ago. So this binder grows and grows. After each job, after each interview, I update it. So in terms of past interviews, usually after my interviews, I write down the questions that I remember that was asked. And then I write down how could I have answered this question better? We've all probably had the experience after a job interview where 5 or 10 minutes later after the interview ended, it comes to you, oh my God, I had the perfect answer for that. And I'm just remembering it now. And I wish I knew it during the job interview or remembered it. So this will help you. After every interview, write down every question that you can remember. Next, what you can also do is ask your network, whether it's your classmates, your colleagues, your old boss, ask your network or your friends, people you went to school with, ask your friends what type of questions did they get asked in their interviews. So usually you'll have this. The next one is internet searches. There are so many lists online. So this was one I did yesterday. As you can see, top traditional interview questions. And the number 1 is tell me about yourself. So you can do internet searches in terms of the top 10, top 20, and prepare answers for it. We'll practice. So for example, I did an internet search on behavioral interview questions, and I found one recently published by LinkedIn. They publish a report on 30 behavioral interview questions to identify high potential candidates. In this report, or in this list of questions, they actually identified 6 areas. 6 areas of questions. One is adaptability, culture fit, collaboration, leadership, growth potential, and prioritization. Because of our time limits, we are only going to discuss the first 4. I'm going to give you a question from number 1, adaptability, which is really important for a lot of organizations. A type of question, we're going to go through a practice of how to create an answer for it. Then I'm going to discuss sample questions for number 2 to 4, and probably what type of skills they're looking for. So let's start. As I mentioned, how to prepare. Make a list of questions. Now that you have your list of questions, write answers and scenarios for each question that you have. This takes a while. Since we're all working from home, you can use this time to start writing your answers and scenarios. So for example, how do you write your answers? Look at the job posting. Usually they will list a set of qualification and skills. So if you have a list of questions, you can see in the job posting what kind of qualification and skills that they're looking for. So make sure that your answers include this. Next one, look at your resume, your past job. What kind of skills and situations fit the questions that you were asked? The next one is think back on your past experiences as well. So what we do is we first make a list of questions, then write answers and scenarios. And make sure for behavioral question, you create a CAR or STAR answer for each question. And I'll show you an example of how to do that. So in the LinkedIn list of questions, the number 1 that they identified as a skill that organizations look for is adaptability. The top question that they had was, tell me about a time when you were asked to do something you had never done before. How did you react and what did you learn? So they're probably looking for skills such as, do you accept change or are you afraid of it? How quickly do you adapt? Are you open to new ideas and method? Or are you in the same mentality as, well, that's how it's always done? So they're looking for someone who can adapt quickly. So let's go. So here's the situation. Tell me about a time when you were asked to do something you had never done before. How did you react? What did you learn? So usually I do this star kind of table for each question. You don't have to write full sentences. You can just write little notes, point form. So for example, the situation. It was a busy time at work. The team leader asked me to prepare a proposal for a new client. I just started this job. It's a first big responsibility. I was excited and nervous. So make sure you answer the question. How did you react? I was excited and nervous. So the next one, the task. Because it was a big client and everybody was busy, it was also a quick deadline. It was a really important client and I needed to get budgets and financial forecasts, which I've never done before. Then the action. Because everybody was busy, I knew people didn't have time to help me. So I asked for similar proposals that were done before. I did research. I took some time to ask questions about the client's needs. And then, because I knew my team leader was busy, I booked a meeting in advance with him on a time that he was free so he can review my proposal. So this shows about looking ahead, right? And then the result. My manager presented it to the client and there was a successful client onboarding. After that, they asked me to help manage the client and I'm now responsible for new proposals. So tells me a time when you were asked to do something you've never done before, some successful results based on the situation, and then what did you learn? What I learned from this experience is I need to learn quickly by doing. I need to not be afraid to ask questions, but I also need to not expect others to hold my hand. I have to take initiative in order to approach something that I've never done before. So again, situation, task, action, result. Very specific way in answering it. Let's go to the next situation. So culture fit, especially for younger generations from millennials onwards, culture fit is a really important part of looking for a job. And some of the questions that they ask are, what are the 3 things that are most important to you in your job? So again, you give a star answer, situation, task, action, and result. But in addition to answering this question, you should probably describe your values, what kind of diversity you will add to organization, how you fit the organization's mission, vision, and values. So make sure you research the organization first. So one example is, what are the 3 things that are most important to you in your job? For example, are you more comfortable with a hierarchical or egalitarian leadership? Hierarchical means top down. The boss is the boss and everybody follows his decisions. Some people really enjoy this type of culture fit because they want a map of how things are done. Some enjoy egalitarian, where leadership, meaning even though we have a boss, anyone from line managers to new hires can contribute to making a decision. It's more of a team effort versus top down. So you can give examples of this and you can research organizations. So for example, for government agencies, it's probably a top-down approach. Okay, so next slide. Collaboration. Give an example when you had to work with someone who was difficult to get along with. How did you handle interactions with that person? This is a very challenging question for some people. This is not the time to complain about the person or the situation. How I like to approach this question is usually, it was the approach. It's a conflict. There was a conflict with someone. It could be their personality. It could be their approach, but at the end, we had the same goal for the organization. So what they're looking for this is, how do you handle conflict? Oops, sorry, going back to the last slide. How do you handle conflict? Do you avoid it? A lot of people avoid conflict. So they want to see, how do you handle conflict? Do you solve it first, or do you go to a line manager? Usually people who are afraid of conflict, they don't want to approach a person, so they go to a third person. This is probably good if you've tried to do it on your own. So what I would recommend is discuss first, how did you handle the conflict yourself? When you realized that this was not being productive, how did you try to involve a third party? This question also looks at, how can you handle difficult people and situations? And do you show constructive approach to issues? So for example, I took some time, I asked this person to have a coffee with me, or we discussed the problem, or we ask a third person to give their unbiased opinion. So they want to see, first of all, whether you handle or avoid conflict. Second of all, what are the constructive or positive approaches to you handling this issue? The fourth area that we'll discuss is leadership. Tell me about the last time something significant didn't go according to plan at work. What was your role and what was the outcome? So again, a STAR method. The STAR method, I'd like you to discuss. This type of question usually looks for, can you inspire and motivate others? Can you make decisions quickly? Can you convince others to create buy-in? Buy-in means somebody says, yes, I agree with you. How can I help you do that? What I would recommend for everybody who's here right now is COVID-19 situation. It has affected all of us in terms of our work, our studies, and things are not going according to plan. Whatever your plan was at the beginning of the year, it's definitely not going on right now. So for example, with the projects I'm involved with, the British Council, we provide training programs. We provide training programs for businesses, international organizations, and also the government. It's usually face-to-face, but because of this current situation, we've had to cancel it. So my role in this is trying to move our training program to online delivery. And in order to do this, I have to convince our partners that online delivery is an effective way of providing training. We can create commitment for people. So what I did was, I created a proposal for all of our clients. I recommended one pilot program to do it, and also walking people in the technical issues of online training. We provided a pilot program, and from that pilot program, the participants were really happy. So now about most of our training has now moved to online. So again, COVID-19 situation has affected our work. The task that I had to do, how can I convince people to move face-to-face training to online delivery? Action that I took, I called them, I discussed the different technology that we use to make sure it's still effective, and I provided a pilot program so that people can experience online delivery without a commitment. As a result, our company partners are really happy about it, participants are really happy about it, and now our training programs are being delivered online. So situation, task, action, and result. So that's how you show the answer to this question. Now that we have the sample types of questions, let's go back again to how you prepare. So make a list of questions, write answers and scenarios. Again, look at really important, look at your job posting, list of qualifications and skills that they're looking for, and then match that with your experiences and skills in your resumes. Think back on your past experiences and create a CAR or STAR answer for each question. This takes a lot of time. The last time I had a job interview with the British Council, I think I practiced, I spent a whole day. One day just looking at the questions, matching it, and then half a day for writing some scenarios. And when I was asked the questions, I actually had prepared answers for it. So it made it smoother. It makes you look more confident in doing this. The next one, really important, practice, practice, practice. You can't just write your answers, you need to practice it. I have been working for almost over 15 years now, and regardless of the job, I always practice my answers. And this way, when you go to the job interview, you are going to remember some of the specific words or phrases that you need to share. It's kind of training your brain and also your mouth muscles to remember the words, to remember the phrases. So how do you practice? I would recommend practice by yourself. You can practice by yourself, read your answers out loud. The other way you can do it is record yourself. I don't recommend memorizing all of the words. Just remember the key words and phrases and imagine the scenario. So as you're answering in a star format, imagine the scenario in your head. This will help you. You can practice in front with a friend or a family member. I practiced with friends from school when I first graduated, and I practiced with my husband, and he gives me some really good advice saying, okay, in this area, you were talking a little bit too much. You were talking in circles, try to be more on point. These are some examples you can do. And time yourself. Time yourself when answering these questions. Usually within a minute and a half. If you talk for more than 2 minutes, people will forget what you are trying to say. So practice, practice, practice. Practice to remember your answers, not necessarily word by word, but kind of the situation and how you imagine it. Practice with a family or a friend, and make sure that your answers are not too long. So before we end, some Q&A. Let me know, is interview in English always available in every single company? It depends on the company. Usually for Indonesia, I usually see that, especially for international organizations, when they say English required, some of the questions might be in English and some in Bahasa, just to test your English language capability. Okay, so others, will we receive the slide PowerPoint through email? I'm happy to share that. If this is uploaded to YouTube, I will ask our communications people. Is this going to be uploaded to YouTube? We also actually have, if you type in British Council Indonesia, we actually have a video about preparing for interview tips.
Sarah.
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, we are going to upload the video on our website.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So the video is going to be uploaded in the website, including our technical issues. Okay, so I'll go do some questions now. Sometimes our previous jobs experiences don't align or match with the industry that we apply right now. How to answer the question if the employer asks, why do we want to change the industry? Good question. So same with me. My background initially was in the arts, and I moved into business, and I moved to training. And the reason for that is I said it's a different skill that I want to focus on. Everybody knows as you grow, you don't stay in the same job. You don't stay in the same job or experience. You can state that as I grow older, I realized that I'm interested in this. So you can frame it as part of your life experience, as part of your life growth. Okay. Another question, what information should I tell the interview when they ask, tell me about yourself? When they say, tell me about yourself or introduce yourself, as I mentioned earlier, this is not the time to share your life story. Tell them about what you've done or studied that ties towards the job posting, whether it is about communication skills, whether it's about marketing skills, whether it's working with a team. So that's one way about tell me about yourself. Um, I'll just stop our screen now. Okay. And another question, does introduce yourself and tell me about yourself the same? Yes, it is. It's similar. So I assume that the interviewer likes to hear a story worth to tell, but I don't have any experience regarding the question. No, it is not okay to make up a story. It is not okay to make up a story. You can always say, I don't have experience in that. Because when people are hiring, they're not hiring someone that knows everything. It's okay. They know that some people might have experience in 80% of the job. Then you can say, I don't have experience in that, but I'm willing to learn. So please do not make up a story, because I've sat through interviews. I've also sat through interviews where I'm interviewing other people. And when you've sat through a lot of interviews, you can tell immediately when somebody's making up the story, whether it's the time it takes them to answer, the words that they are using. What's really important during job interviews, think of it as dating. Think of it as dating. Are you a good fit for the company? Are they a good fit for you? Think of it as dating. They want to know how authentic you are. So, and be honest, but not too honest, such as like in 5 years, I'm planning to go in grad school. Be authentic in your answers. They appreciate that more than someone who makes up stories. Does the interviewer also put his or her attention to the way we speak when answering the questions? Not necessarily the way you speak, but how confident you are. Because imagine when you start working for this company, you are a representative of this company or this organization. So you need to be confident. You need to be self-assured. And what you can do, one way to be confident is preparing for interview questions. Then you're not so nervous. Next question, should we always answer with our successful story, or can we also share our failure if we really failed in that situation? You can always share your failure. It doesn't really influence your score. What they look for is how you handled. So if you failed, I failed in this, going forward, this is what I learned. So if you share your failure where it was not a successful outcome, share what you learned, share how you avoided it again in the future. Another question, usually it's a common question in Indonesia when the HR asks us about our expected salary, how to answer it without being ambitious. What I would do, I also do this, is do research on salary. Do research and say that there's a lot of organizations like Robert Walters, Michael Page, which are international organizations that are here in Indonesia, and they publish annually a salary survey. So they survey people in different industries, and you can state that, in this publish, they stated that a salary for this position with people with similar experience with me is within the range. So instead of saying, I want X million rupiah, or I expect X million rupiah, state a low and high end range, because this is part of your negotiation process. You can state and state the reason why and where you found this range. So you can say, in my previous job, this was the range, or based on industry standards that was published by Robert Walters Recruiting Company for a position, for this position, which is with similar experience such as me, the range for a salary is between X and Y million rupiah. So that's how I would answer that question. Then it gives you some space to negotiate when you are offered the job. Another question is, what if I have idle time about a year? What good answers for it? You can say, I needed to take some time. So for example, for me, before moving to Indonesia, I did not work for a year and a half. And one reason for that was I gave birth to my son. So I took some time off. I mentioned that I've been working either part-time or full-time since I was 14, 15 years old. So my first job was when I was 15 years old as a part-time job. And I've been working continually. And this was my first time taking a break for over 20 years. So I decided to take some time off to reevaluate how I want to proceed with my career now that I have a family. You tell a story. So if you take a time off, you can say, what is the reason? What is the reason that you have this, that you took some time off? You can say that it could be a personal reason. I had to take care of my family, my parents. I wanted to travel a little bit more to expand my knowledge and my experience. I wanted to volunteer. So just state, don't state that I took some time off because I just stayed at home to play video games. That is not a good answer. You can also say I was laid off. I lost my job because of company restructuring. And because of this current situation, I decided to take some time off, focus on some personal goals, or you can just say it took me this long because of the economic situation. I was laid off from my job, and it has taken a year to find a job that is a good fit for me. So make sure that you tell a story about why you did not have a job for a year. It's not unusual. It's not unusual for people to have some time off. Where can we find previous Culture Connect webinar videos? It is in the website. So type in British Council Culture Connects. I think you can find that there. When we were asked about tell me about yourself, you said it's not the time to tell our life story. And I was so blunt. Sorry, I'm looking when I've done throughout my life. Was it wrong? No, it's not wrong for you to do so, but make sure that you tie in your story. You tie in your story to the role, because imagine that there's someone who's interviewing. They're interviewing a lot of people, so you have to be really concise. You have to be really concise about what you share, and you have to be really strategic about the information that you share. This is showing how you are a good match. So tell me about yourself. It's how you are a good match of whether it's your education experience, your first job experience, your study experience. How does that tie into any skills and behavior that will make you a good fit into this job? So that's how I would approach it. Why is honesty is not the best policy? Honesty is not the, I'm not saying honesty is not the best policy. What I'm trying to say is you need to be concise. You do not need to tell all of your life, just a portion for it, and very specific. Because if you come into an interview and you're telling about unrelated experience, unrelated work that has nothing to do with the job, the interviewer is sitting there thinking, okay, how is he or she a good fit for us? So what I'm trying to say is if you tell your story, make sure that it's concise and it's very specific to how your story is a good fit for this job and is a good fit for this organization. Otherwise, if you're telling everything, it's making the interviewer's job harder to look for the skills that they're looking for. So for you, so for example, if you're telling your story, when you go to a job interview, what the job interviewer is doing is they already know you're qualified for this job. Now they're trying to see if you're a good fit for this job. So this is your time. When you go to an interview, think of how to make it easy for them, how to make their job easy in terms of making a decision that you are a good fit. So your answers should fit within that. How to explain our weaknesses to the interviewer well without weakening our chances of getting a job. Usually the strategy for this is show a strength that's not a weakness, or show weakness and how you learn from it. So for example, one of my weaknesses is I always get really excited at the start of a project, but as it goes on, I get demotivated. So I need additional motivation. So kind of like at the start of a project, I'm really excited, I'm ready to go. If it drags on the planning, I procrastinate. So one of the things I can do to avoid procrastination is I set up schedules for myself. I schedule meetings with my line managers in order as external motivators. So that's a way of answering weaknesses. What should we answer when the HR asks us any questions on the end of the interview? Is it a bad thing if we answer no because we really don't have any questions, or should we ask them some questions to show our interest? I always recommend asking a question afterwards, not because it's going to avoid your chances, but this is also a time for you to see if this organization is a good fit. A lot of people go into interviews thinking, I want to get hired, so I need to impress them. But it's actually a way for the organization, for you to see if you are also a good fit for an organization. I usually try to ask, okay, how many people are interviewing for this job? You know, how many candidates are you considering? What is the next stage after this interview? Like, what is the next stage? I usually ask, what is the next stage? Because it's kind of your right as well to find out, okay, are they going to make a decision in 2 weeks, or are they going to email you? Some questions I ask usually, what is the ideal things that you are looking for a person in this job? So 3 things I usually ask is, how many candidates are you interviewing? What is the next stage after this interview? And also, usually the first question I ask is, you know, the person, I know you're interviewing a lot of people. What are the ideal skills? What are you looking for? If I've seen a job posting, I usually ask, is this a new position? So for example, for the British Council, my current job is a new position. It was newly created. So it helped me have an idea, okay, I need to do this and this and this, versus someone who already had a job. So is this a new position? You can ask, you know, what were the challenges? If it's not a new position, what were the challenges the last person who had this position? You know, what were the challenges? So it'll give you an idea of kind of the responsibilities you'll also be doing in that job. So those are the questions that we have. Based on your experience, what is the most blunder act of a job seeker? Most blunder experience is lying. So interviewers, they do this as a professional job. Interviewers do hundreds, if not thousands, of interviews in their lifetime with an organization. So they are familiar. So they can see when somebody is lying or fibbing. So avoid it. You can say that I'm sorry, I can't remember an experience that fits that right now. You can say that. You can be honest and say, I've never had that experience, but I'm willing to learn. Just don't lie or fib in a job. Another question, I want to change my industry from working as a secretary to working in tourism. I'm interested step yet. Now I'm ready to get out of my comfort zone and would like to change tourism, but I don't have this experience. So as a secretary, you can highlight the transferable skills. Anybody who's moving, changing jobs or changing sectors, as a secretary, you probably had to deal with a lot of people. So highlight your people skills. For tourism, it's a lot of customer-oriented client skills. So highlight those experiences. Not necessarily, so imagine your transferable skills. What are they? So when you're preparing for a job, imagine when you're preparing for a job interview, always examine what kind of skills you're going to bring. It might be a different sector, but you will bring the same skills in terms of communication, in terms of handling conflict, in terms of team building, in terms of providing service. So think of those skills. I think those are all the questions that we have. I'll give it back to our organizers for some closing remarks. Okay, let me just go back. Okay, I think that's it for our questions. So as we mentioned, we will upload the video of this online. You can also Google on YouTube, British Council Indonesia interview tips. We have some additional tips on there. And we're also happy to, if you want to email us, you can email us through, or find us on Instagram, ID British or ID Learn English. Other than that, thank you for joining our session. It lasted longer than expected. Thank you so much, and hopefully we'll see you in other events. Okay, bye.
Bye. Thank you, Sarah, and thank you everyone for joining us. Please do follow our Instagram, ID British, for more updates.
And in 10, we have another Cultural Connects at 3 p.m. today, yes?
Yes, we are going to go live on Instagram at 4 p.m. There will be an ulama from UK who will be chatting with us about what Ramadan is like in the UK. So it will be interesting. Please do join us.
Oh, thank you very much. And also, before I forget, next Friday, we're offering, you can Google ID Learn English, a workshop on presentation skills. This one, unfortunately, is a paid workshop. I think it's about 100,000. You can also register and see some advice on how to improve your presentation skills. Other than that, thank you everyone for joining today, and hope to see you another time. Okay, bye.
Bye. Thank you.